Welcome everyone to District Hall's Zoom platform. My name is Jordan, and thank you for joining us. This is the first training session in our virtual series. I'll be focusing on information security essentials for small businesses. This session will be focusing on how to prevent phishing. Please stay muted during the presentation unless there's a chance for questions. Here with us are Meredith Carroll of Vertical 6 and Matt Leathers, an experienced consultant. Combined, they have 40 years of experience in large and small technology transformation, and I'll let them take it away.
Hi, everybody. I'm Matt Leathers, and I'm honored to be here with Meredith. We've worked together in the past, and we're pretty excited about being able to share this content and these ideas with you. And this is, as Jordan mentioned, the first in a series this week. And primarily, we're focused on the essential techniques and tools to protect your business. So this is not a sales pitch. This is not a session where you're going to walk out scared and not sure what to do. That's actually the opposite of what we intend to do. And by a little bit of background, we're going to walk through ourselves, introduce ourselves. Who are we? Why should you trust us? Given that there's a lot of cybersecurity content out there, we'd like to credentialize ourselves and let us know that you can trust us, and here's why we're doing this, and here's what we're doing. Here are some facts around why small businesses should actually care and take cybersecurity and information security seriously. And then we start what's really the meat of the content in terms of facts and prevention. And we're starting with phishing, given that it is a primary source of problems for small businesses, and it is the favorite attack method for adversaries and attackers out there. And we have a second session and a third session later on this week, but we'll discuss those later after we finish up today. And let's dig into introductions. Meredith.
Thanks, Matt. My name is Meredith Carroll, and I am with Vertical 6, a managed service provider in Warwick, Rhode Island. I have had a career that spans consulting for large businesses and small businesses, everything from a 90,000 seat email engineering project to today, where I am working with small businesses throughout New England as their virtual CIO. I have a certification as an information systems auditor, and security has really been my focus for the past several years. And for you, Matt?
Thanks, Meredith. I'm Matt Leathers. I'm an experienced consultant, and over the last, I'd say, 5 to 10 years, I've started to focus on serving as an interim chief information officer, typically for small businesses that maybe have grown to the point where they did not necessarily need full-time technology staff or resources. But they've reached that tipping point where they actually need some full-time advice. So, for example, there's a architecture firm that I'm helping right now and helping them go through this change and this transfer from in-person work to shifting their work online as a part of the COVID crisis. And also digging into mergers and acquisitions and investments and due diligence there. And frankly, security is a significant piece of looking at a potential merger or an acquisition or even an investment. The security position of a company is actually emerging as an issue just as important as looking at their financials or looking at their legal and intellectual property rights and those factors when you're making an acquisition decision.
And Matt, I think it's interesting when we talk about our experience has been in large enterprise corporations as well as small businesses, and having that enterprise experience really brings a different perspective to the small business because we can tailor those solutions, know what really should be happening, and tailor those solutions and advice to the small business.
Yeah, and I think that's a good segue into, in terms of the headlines, small businesses are typically asking this question of, why us? Why should we be concerned about it when we see Walmart or the DoD or Target or Equifax in the headlines? And the reality is that, yes, those are big organizations or big entities, but they're in the headlines because people care about those names. They maybe don't necessarily care about the jeweler that was responsible for the breach of Walmart in the case of the news headlines on this slide. And so when we're talking about those big enterprises, they can do some things differently than a small to medium-sized business can. but at the same time, as a part of the larger ecosystem, like in the case of this jeweler, Walmart was about 60% of their business. And it was a jeweler who had been in business for about 100 years, based out of Chicago. And I think it's a serious question at this point. Are they still getting 60% of their business from Walmart? Or is this an event a significant enough event where Walmart, as their biggest customer, said, you know what, we're going to start moving our business somewhere else? So it's imperative for small businesses to take this seriously. But as you mentioned, Meredith, we have a particular sensitivity and an awareness of the fact that big companies have resources that smaller companies don't, especially if you don't even have a full-time IT person or organization. And if you're a founder running your business, the last thing you care about is frequently technology. But especially these days, being able to at least do the bare minimum to protect yourself and protect your business is important.
And I think we're also going to see, and we have seen this certainly in telecommunications and in the defense industry, those bigger companies that have small companies in their supply chains, they're going to start auditing the smaller businesses in their supply chains because they need the assurances to know that the links below them are protected in a reasonable way so that those breaches can't roll up. So I think that's right. Another important piece to keep in mind as a small business is that if you are a supplier to up the supply chain, you may see that those bigger companies are beginning to perpetuate audits down to your business.
That's right, and I think to your point, you've mentioned before, and I like the headline that you suggested is one bad click can break a business. It can hurt the brand, it can hurt the business, and the reality is being able to protect your business, be able to protect the brand that you have built, your reputation for integrity and safety and good product and quality. Those are important things, and information security is another toolkit or another piece of your toolkit as you build your brand, as you protect your brand. And in a sense, to shift this to the positive light, if you have that reputation and if you are known as being a verified, well-run, secure place to do business, then that actually, I think, increases your opportunities, especially with the larger providers who are looking for secure suppliers to provide them with products and goods and services.
Absolutely. So in the small business space, we do see that there is a lot of risk. As Matt mentioned, the headlines continually talk about the big companies because we're talking about a broad attack spectrum. We're talking about fines and massive losses of data. But really, we see that small businesses are being targeted every day. Some of them are specific targets. Some of them are just emails that are spammed across a number of different addresses just to try to get some action. So we're going to be seeing, if you haven't seen it already, and I think we have a poll a little bit later on about who's seen what kind of phishing attacks out there. If you haven't seen it already, it is absolutely coming. So we just really want to be prepared and make sure that all of your team members are prepared to avoid that one bad click that Matt talked about.
And so a little bit of humor injected into the conversation today, because the fact of the matter is, raise your hand in your head or internally if you have attended or heard a cybersecurity event or read an article that you found to just kind of make you scared. And the reality is that there's this concept called FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt, FUD. And that's often used to sell security solutions and sell information security software or services across the board. And so the reality is that, yeah, this information security is something that you need to take seriously. Small businesses are under attack. But the bigger picture here is that if we just focus on the fear, we're going to react and maybe take actions that aren't actually helpful in the long run. And so what we want to do here is, laugh a little bit at the amount of fear and uncertainty and doubt that are out there, but a little bit of gallows humor. But the bigger picture here is that there's actually hope, and that security isn't out of reach for a small business.
And too, Matt, we talk about that security has to be a balance. We need to make sure that there are some basic pieces in place that we'll be talking about a little bit today, and definitely in the future sessions this week. But security is a balance, right? I have to balance my security with my usability, because I can secure a system to the nth degree, but I will not be able to access it, right? Mm-hmm. And also cost. So we're going to talk about some solutions that are built in, some solutions that are free, and some solutions that have some costs associated with them. But always remembering that we need to have balance with how we're approaching security throughout the organization, recognizing what the risks are, what are we trying to protect, and what is the cost associated with that, both in dollars and in productivity.
Right. And I think, our hope for you is that by the end of the session that you have practical, actionable advice that you can start doing even during this session. And so we want to be grounded in things that you can do right away. Their initial piece is going to be getting smart and understanding what the facts are and what the information is. But once you have that, actually walking quickly to how to actually keep yourself safe. So hope is nice, but actually taking action is actually where the rubber meets the road. So our goal is to marry hope and the bigger idea that this is a positive thing and you can do things, and then marry that with the actions that you can take right away.
So the reason that we decided to start with an entire session just on phishing is that 91% of cybersecurity breaches actually start with a phishing attack. It's super easy for the bad guys out there to just send an email and either get access to your systems or get you to do something. And phishing is how those bad guys, the outsiders, get access to your systems or to money, really, is what it comes down to. The vast majority of what we see today is in email. So you'll see a message that says, it's from someone that says, click this link to read this great article, or it appears to be from someone you know. Maybe it appears to come from another key player in the organization, or it's impersonating the CEO asking an employee to purchase some gift cards. And we'll get into the details of all those. But also, you might see messages in LinkedIn or Facebook or text messages that may also be phishing attacks. Sometimes, the SMS or the text ones are called smishing. So you might hear some different words around that. But really, all of those are ways to get people to do something, to either grant access to information or extort some money. So phishing really is the key way that companies are being attacked, and the method of penetration into an environment to get to the means to the end for the attacker.
And Meredith, when we sat down to talk about this series, it was when we could still meet in person. And I believe you had a experience where somebody had actually fallen victim to a phishing message.
Yeah. We are working with a company who had an employee that opened a link in Gmail. It looked like a receipt from a bookstore the person had been shopping at, and so the person clicked on it. And about 2 weeks later, all of the data within that organization was encrypted. And there were some cascading effects from that, but it's had a serious business impact, all from going back to one bad click that the employee did not understand how to evaluate the email that they got and clicked on a link.
Right. And to your point, Meredith, the reason we are focusing so much on this, and on the lower right-hand side of this, there's some general statistics around the number of times this attack method is used. And so there's anecdotal reports as well as data-based reports coming out of different government entities and professional firms that try to measure the typical types of attacks and how successful they are. And so in 2019, the data coming from Verizon was saying that 76% of small businesses were attacked. But the reality is, I think, when we were looking at that information, Meredith and I agreed, these are vastly underreported. And so it's probably, in our experience, closer to 100%. And only 30% of those messages are opened. That's probably much higher. And remember, it's self-reported information. So self-reported numbers are that only 12% of those phishing messages were opened and then subsequently acted upon. So a link was clicked, or somebody logged into a fake website, or a file was downloaded and opened. We believe that these numbers are significantly underreported. But even if they are underreported, it is still the vast majority of the volume in terms of information attacks and cybersecurity attacks. Yes, there are other attack methods. There are other one-off scenarios that we could probably all recite headlines. But if you cover and if you are aware of what phishing is and you prevent it, then that is roughly 91% of your risk.
And I would comment that, our support, the Vertical 6 support team, sees mailbox breaches on a very regular basis. This is a case where somebody gets a phishing message, they click on the link, they are tricked into putting in their email address and password. And if they don't have protections in place, the threat actors can then get access to the mailbox. I have, in my experience, not ever seen those reported to the authorities. So typically they are low risk, low impact breaches, but they're not going to fall into those statistics that we're seeing on the slide. Right. So typically we see reporting happening either when an organization needs to make an insurance claim, or when there's a required reporting incident. So if it's a healthcare organization that has had patient records compromised, they're then required to report. So it's really insurance and mandated reporting where we see these types of breaches reported to the authorities, which is, again, it's when we're looking at the small business space, typically we're not in a, unless you're a medical organization in a HIPAA space that you have to report. And then, typically we're only reporting to insurance companies if we're working with an organization who really hasn't followed best practices to protect themselves.
And we see that kind of shifting and changing as information security breaches and attacks are becoming more commonplace. The requirements to report if you have been breached are becoming more robust. So I think right now, for the vast majority, small to medium-sized businesses, unless you're in some of the industries that Meredith mentioned, are generally exempt from current legislation that has been passed and becoming enforced. But the reality is that more than likely will change as regulatory agencies try to catch up to this and start closing loopholes. More than likely, it's probably safer to assume that you will need to report than you won't need to report.
And it's definitely worth investigating and knowing what kind of data you're holding and where that falls with respect to the reporting regulations. So if you have a large amount of certainly health information, credit card information, or personally identifiable information, those are the three areas that typically have reporting requirements associated with them. So again, it's important to understand what you're trying to protect and then determining what solutions you need to protect it. And then in our last session, we'll be talking about things like cyber liability insurance and understanding what you need there.
Meredith, it seems like a good time to pause and see if there are any questions before we dig into knowing your fish. So knowing the type of fish, and then talking about how to catch and release, shall we say. So,
just a few puns.
Right. Any questions out there?
I'll throw one out there for you. So I used to work at a small regional bank, and we had our IT department send out like practice phishing emails. How often, or should companies be doing that on a regular basis to kind of test their employees, or is that something like how does that work? How would you recommend doing that?
Yeah, The one thing I would say to start off with in terms of program, well, maybe two. Yes, great idea. You know, before the final exam, it's good to have a quiz, right? And they happen so often that, you know, you don't need to test your teams and your folks daily, but testing them on a regular basis. But the second piece is typically when organizations do those tests, they tend to use it to punish people or out the people that didn't pass. And I've even heard stories about organizations that would send somebody from the IT department in fishing gear with a rod and the hat, looked like the Gorton's fishermen, to stand by the desk for a couple of hours of the people who had fallen for the test. That's not going to help you, because if somebody does make a mistake, and people do make mistakes, if you've got a culture of shame and a culture of blame, do you think they're going to come forward when they make a mistake? Absolutely not. So when you have those self-test programs, doing it in a way that is not going to embarrass or shame people, because instead of coming forward, which is what you want them to do if they make a mistake, they will actively hide it. And that only increases the amount of time it takes to find out if you've been breached or not. Meredith, any thoughts?
I think it's absolutely a great idea, and we'll have some resources at the end of our presentation for free resources out there that can help with phishing tests. But to Matt's point, as long as it's intended to build an awareness campaign, it's a great way to increase people's knowledge about what to look out for in a bad email or a bad fish. You know, how to find the stink, I guess, of the bad fish. But you know, definitely we want to have people raising their hand if they think they might have clicked on a bad email. The average time to detect a breach is 270 days. Phishing breaches, I think, are a little bit shorter, because typically you know right away if you bought a gift card inadvertently, or if you know within a couple of weeks if there's ransomware in your environment. But you want to know sooner rather than later, so you can begin the forensics that you might need to undertake to eradicate the risk. But I will comment that most companies that have acceptable use policies and or are doing phishing tests have clauses in them that say, you know, we can terminate you if you fail for a test, fall for a phish. So it's definitely worth having some balance there. Kind of like Matt, how we're trying to have some balance with this presentation today about it's not a scare tactic. This is educational. We want you to know what you should be doing to prevent these problems rather than as a scare tactic or a punishment.
Okay, let's dig into the different schools of fish.
So I always talk about there's different types of fish out there. And we're going to cover 3 different ones today. And then later on in the presentation, we'll talk about how you need different types of bait or different types of nets to catch these fish. So it's not a one solution fits all kind of scenario with phishing. So our first kind of fish is ransomware. So ransomware is malware or a virus that once it's introduced onto a network, it will begin encrypting data. So it'll encrypt the desktop that it was introduced on, and it will encrypt any other data it can reach out to. So file shares, application data, all those types of things begin to be encrypted, and they will continue to encrypt until somebody notices. I always think about these fish as kind of being Pac-Man, because they just go through and eat your data as they go. To get your data back, you either have to restore from a backup, and you'll hear us talk about backup being the #1 defense for security across the board. So you either have to restore from a good backup, or you have to pay the ransom. I will say that the last claim that I saw for ransom was in the realm of $540,000, and these guys, they don't care. They just want to get their money, and it's very lucrative for them. They wouldn't do this if it wasn't making money. But the key here, as with all of the fish, is that it doesn't work unless somebody clicks on the link. It doesn't work unless somebody introduces the ransomware into the environment. So we'll show you how to recognize those emails in just a little bit.
Yeah, and I think to that point, Meredith, we, in talking with a number of small businesses, the phish, and particularly ransomware, can be disguised quite well. And you may think that a third state or a foreign party is attacking you, but really it's criminals who have almost perfected this strategy. But again, they're not in unless you actually unintentionally cooperate. Rarely is it an intentional act. Most of the time it is people just simply make a mistake. But that's the point of the attack, is to try to get you to do something, try to get you to make a mistake that they can then capitalize on. And to Meredith's point, it's quite lucrative.
They do quite well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So our second kind of phish is a phish that is trying to get access to your mailbox usually. So these phish try to get your password so they can then either impersonate you or impersonate someone that you're communicating with. So this is a case where you might get a link to a document or something else that looks interesting. It again will look like it comes from someone you know. It actually may be from someone you know because they may have fallen for the scam already. So you get an email, you click on the link, it says, hey, log into your email or log into your bank or log into something. You put in your username and your password and they have access. And again, we'll talk about ways to prevent them from having access with just your username and password. But once they're in, they can access your, if it's your mailbox, they can access the entire contents of your mailbox. In many cases, they then begin to look for information in the mailbox about financial transactions. So as an example, there was an organization who had a mailbox breach, and it actually was a person in their financial department of their organization. And the threat actors saw that there was a payment about to be made to another organization. So they impersonated the payee and sent a fake email saying, hey, we have a new routing number. So change the routing number to this and pay that account instead. So they're looking for ways to either get information from the mailbox that they can then exploit, or then inject themselves into the conversation with yet more phishing emails to get money. So again, it's another way of getting money. And also, right. Just like ransomware, it has to be initiated by a person inside the organization.
And we've seen examples of where there are school districts who were provided with different routing and banking numbers, and they ended up paying a vendor that they thought they were paying their HVAC vendor or their food services vendor. When in reality, they were actually paying the money out to a cyber criminal, simply because, to Meredith's point, they injected themselves, they made themselves look like the small business or the finance lead or the controller or the CFO of the small business. So they appeared to be legitimate, but they were actually not. And there's a fair number of, I believe Zoom had a breach last week. And so another key thing here is your professional and business accounts versus your personal accounts. If you're sharing passwords and sharing IDs between those accounts, when a criminal goes after Zoom or Hulu or your Netflix password and ID, many times it's not necessarily so they can watch Tiger King nonstop and share it with their friends. Many times it's actually, if they can get your password and your information from one of those platforms for personal use, they can learn a lot about what your passwords probably are on, say, QuickBooks or on your bank's website. And so it may not seem to be a high value target, but it's another piece of the puzzle that they try to get to your business accounts and the flow of money, whether it's your business or using you as the entry point into a larger business, like in the case of the Walmart and Target breaches.
So a good example of that is a person that is known to me whose Facebook password was compromised. So hackers got control of that person's Facebook account, also could see the person's employment history. The person worked at a bank, and the person was using the same password at the bank as they were using on Facebook. So now the threat actors had access to this person's account, business account at the bank, their user account at the bank. You know, the key here too with financial transactions in particular, and we'll also cover this again later, is that anytime there's a change to a financial account number, to anything within a financial transaction, it's critically important to always perform a voice confirmation with the person requesting the change prior to making the change. And you need to contact them in a known good number, not the phone number in the email asking for the change, because that may be a fake as well. So this goes from everything from an employee who wants to change their direct deposit all the way to an electronic funds transfer you might be doing with your insurance company or with any other vendor that you're working with. So that voice confirmation is actually the best way to prevent these types of phish from being successful. And our third phish is the phish that's trying to get you to do something. So every time I walk into a client meeting and start talking about the gift card email, so it's the email that an employee got from the CEO asking them to go buy iTunes gift cards or some other gift card, to a meeting. Every single meeting I've been in, the people know exactly what I'm talking about because they've seen it already. So those fake emails usually from somebody else inside the organization that's trying to get you to go usually buy something. So in the iTunes case, they want you to go buy these iTunes because there's going to be a contest at a meeting they're in, and they can't talk to you right now. So just have all your communications be over email. It's all very suspicious in a number of different ways, but you go buy the gift cards, and they ask you to scratch off the numbers and just send them the codes, and away they go with all of your money. One interesting thing on the action phish, particularly with gift cards, is that in a number of cases, it's cashiers that are catching this. So cashiers and point of sale systems have been changed to prompt questions around, are you buying these cards for yourself or did someone ask you to buy them? So that's a super interesting effect of this phenomenon, which is so prevalent right now.
Right, and especially during the time of COVID, you know, it can seem like there's goodwill, but
Sure.
whether it's a crisis like COVID and the pandemic, or if it's just during the holidays, we've seen examples of that. We've seen tax season scams. Those are especially effective to say thank you to the staff, or to say thank you to your finance team or your CPA. And these are, you know, all phishing requires action, but these are kind of going above and beyond downloading a file or clicking a link. This is often asking you to go to the store or make a purchase that is typically requires a little more effort than what's contained in the message or the email. And as Meredith mentioned, these tend to be a little easier to catch. But again, if you are in a time of crisis or a busy season, you are also agreeing with the sentiment typically. You want to do good and you want to be helpful. There's a sense of urgency. And so that's how they are able to play on your sense of urgency and your sense of being helpful and doing good. At times also, they will appear to be a request that they want to keep as a surprise. You know, they don't want anybody else to know. Precisely because if you actually ask other people, right. they don't want anybody else to know, exactly. And so, yeah, these are typically the kind of phish broadly that we see. And part of the disservice that we do in the security space is we create new acronyms and new words and new language to kind of describe the different types of phishing and the types of different phish you can identify and throw back. So we've kept it intentionally simple because really they all come back to these core, these different, 3 different schools of phish.
So my guess is that everyone here, either on the live broadcast or watching later on, has seen at least some of these phish. You know, as I mentioned, when I walk into a meeting with a client, and say, you know, talk about gift cards, they're all nodding their heads because everyone has seen it. So want to do a quick poll map to see who's seen which kinds of fish?
Yeah, could we see, just enter into the chat which type of fish that you have seen. And if you could go ahead and enter into the chat, 1 for ransomware, 2 for access, 3 for the Action Plus, or if you've seen all of these, if you could enter a 4, just to have an idea of where people are seeing the most volume. Because the reality is, as our defenses change, as we get smarter, the adversaries and the attackers will try different methods and different tactics as well.
So it looks like quite a few people have seen all of them, but everyone so far has seen the action one, the gift card one,
Okay.
and then the access one. It's funny with the action fish. You know, I've been at Vertical 6 for a while, and I know that if I get an email from my boss saying, do you have a moment to dash out for a task? That's not how they talk at all.
Right.
So I can identify a fish asking me to go, you know, buy gift cards from my manager very quickly. But a lot of times we also see those targeted at brand new employees and their messages from the CEO. So a brand new employee who's just getting their feet under them at a job is going to want to do everything they can to take care of the CEO, right?
Right.
So it's a very interesting phenomenon. But yeah, if my boss says, can you dash out for a task? No, that's not how he's going to ask me.
Right. And I think another piece here of this puzzle is consistency too. So to your point, is everybody aware of how the leader in the organization, how the CEO or the founder works in their style? Because some CEOs, it may be their style to, you know, fire off an abrupt request, but in this day and age, you know, making sure that everybody is on the same page and that the new employee isn't confused or left out in terms of what's expected or what's protocol. Or in many cases, the senior employees are the ones who are the worst offenders. So making sure that they are engaging with the other employees and that they are following these rules and running these checks to make sure that they themselves don't fall victim, because many times they're trying to move fast, they're trying to grow their business, they're trying to operate their business. And so in that mindset, you tend to read and react as opposed to taking a beat, taking a moment, and, you know, applying a lens and a framework to say, is this legitimate? Does this make sense? Should I do something, or is this actually legitimate? And that's going to be the next piece that we talk through, is how to recognize these different fish and throw them back.
So there are some definite signs that an email is actually a fish. So when you get a message from your boss asking you to go buy gift cards, you need to carefully check the email address that it's coming from. A lot of times it will say the boss, but it's actually from somebody completely outside the organization. It's from a Gmail address, it's from a made-up address that looks a lot like your company's address, but it's not from your actual boss's email address. Context: is this something that I'm waiting for? Is this something that that is in the vernacular of the person I'm communicating with? So I know how my boss signs all of his emails. It's a little different from most people, and if I get a message from him that doesn't end that way, I know it's not him. Looking for grammar mistakes and the style, language, and tone of the message. So if it's just slightly looks off from what normal language would look like in our culture, I want to make note of that. So I think the message I mentioned said, do you have a moment to dash off for a task? That's a very British sounding sentence, right? It's not something that someone in the Northeast of New England is generally going to be saying. Do I have time to dash off for a task? Number 5 is about, you know, if it's a financial transaction of any sort, whether it's buying a gift card or it's changing direct deposit information, or it's paying a vendor, if there's a change in that methodology of payment, you want to confirm that with a trusted phone number. Again, a lot of times these folks will have a signature line that looks like your company's signature line or your vendor's signature block, but they've changed the phone numbers. So if you want to try to call them, you won't get the actual person you think you're calling, you'll get the impersonator. And then the last one is be very careful with links and attachments. So for links, we're going to show you how to evaluate a link to know if it's real or not. But if you're getting a message from your bank or from another financial institution, it is generally best to not click on the link, but go to that company's website in your browser separately, and then you know you're where you're supposed to be. You know, it's even to the point for me, if I get a call from the health insurance company wanting information from me on, you know, a phone call, I don't answer them. I let them know that I will get my insurance card, I will get the phone number from the back, and I will call them back at a known good number. You know, you'd be very cautious about giving up personal information on an inbound phone number or an inbound email for that matter. And then attachments can also carry ransomware code in them. They can carry any number of viruses. So we want to be careful with those, making sure that we're screening them well, that if it's something that you didn't expect to be getting, don't open it. So I got a mail from a client last week that she was wondering if she should pay an invoice. And she sent me what I thought was the invoice from an email. And my first message back to her was, who did you get this from? You know, and can you forward me the original message so I can evaluate that message before opening this PDF? In this case, it turned out she'd gotten a paper statement and scanned it in herself, so it was fine. But under no circumstances am I going to open an invoice that's forwarded to me without knowing exactly where it came from, because invoices sometimes create urgency and get people to open them even though they're fake. Invoices, shipping statements, I think everyone's probably seen the Apple receipts for your iTunes purchases that are frequently fake. So you need to know how to check all of that very carefully.
Right. And we're going to go through the next portion, just go through some examples of how to apply some of these rules. But the larger context is, you know, if you think about early in the presentation, the difference between being concerned or in a highly reactive freak out mode versus a more meditative mindset. Work is serious, business is serious, we work hard, we work very hard, but take a breath, take a beat, and run through this checklist, and you'll find that you're much, much safer.
And education is the key.
Right, that's right. Everybody, all of your employees, and even, you know, personally, your family and other business partners, share this and walk through this and talk through this together.
So here's an example of an email from Google. So let's take a look at what we see in this that are hints that or glaring errors that tell us that this is a phishing email. So the first thing I can look at is the email address. It has a spelling error in it, right? Winning alert instead of winning alert. And it's from google.org. And the last time I checked, Google was not a not-for-profit organization. So that .org is a dead giveaway. Anything from Google is going to be a .com. So I can also look at that subject line with an attachment. So official winning letter by Google and MasterCard. So there's spaces missing, there's capitalization. This also is saying that it's a PDF, but if I look, Matt, I don't know if you can show us on the screen and give us a little pointer of where that icon is for the PDF.
Sorry about that.
It's not a PDF icon. That would give us a hint that it's in fact not a PDF message. Would you expect to get a free gift card from Google just for using Google? I don't think that would be something that I would generally think was a valid message. And I can also look at Dear Eileen's signature block there, and there are so many mistakes in it. So this is a managing director at Google. There's capitalization issues. There's just all kinds of red flags within that block. that would say to me, this can't be real. But why would someone open that PDF and click on links in this message? Because they're going to give you something for free, right? So how many times in social media do we see people posting a link or an article because Target says if I post this, I'll get a $200 gift card. Those are never real, ever, 100% fake all the time. And something like this that is saying I'm going to give you some free money just because I think it's cool is 99.9% going to be fake.
Right. And they're relying on the fact of the matter is, can't hurt, might help, because it's pretty easy to click on the link. It's pretty easy to fill out the form. But because it's easy, they're relying on you to lower your defenses and to not think about it. But the reality is the risk reward here is there is no reward. It's not a real request. And the risk is incredibly high because they're going to, more than likely, judging from the attachment name, MasterCard, they're probably going to ask for your credit card data for some reason to say, make a deposit or something like that. So it seems low risk and high reward for you, but the reality is it's zero reward, incredibly high risk.
Absolutely. So we talked about links and being able to evaluate a link before you click on it. So what you do with a link is you can hover over it. We'll show you an example on the next page, and you'll see a pop-up of where the link is actually going. So a link might say bankofamerica.com, but if you hover over it, it could be going somewhere absolutely different than that. So what I'm really looking for with a link is, what does it say just before the first single backslash? So when I look at a URL or a link, the first bit where it says HTTPS, that's the protocol, the language it's talking. After the double slash is the server that it's going to. And what I really care about is what's right before that first single slash. So I want to see the name of the company that I think I'm going to. So in this case, it says vertical6.com. I know that's going to go to my company's website. Everything after that first single slash, it's just telling it where on the server to go. I don't really care about any of that, but it's really paying attention to what's before that first single slash, because that'll tell you what company, what server it's actually going to. So on the next slide, we have an example of a pop-up to show us where a link is actually going. And there you have it. If you hover your mouse over a link, like I said, this one says it's going to americanexpress.com, but in fact, it's going to an unpronounceable for me website. So that's a very good check on the link to make sure that it's going where you think it's going. And Matt, I don't know if you want to go over some of the other hints in this one.
Yeah, it's there's some interesting things here in terms of, an American Express check card. Yes, American Express is a bank, but most of their products are credit cards. And so right out of the gate, applying that same framework of what's the context here, because the context right out of the gate seems strange. And the tone of most financial institutions, most organizations these days have a policy of not asking for passwords, and they're explicitly asking me to log in. And then it's not listed here, but if they did have a phone number, because instead of a phone number, they have a link that they're asking me to log into and verify my account. It's amex.corp instead of .com. And then to Meredith's point, it's Bierman Pout, which last time I checked had nothing to do with American Express. And so whether it's a link or a phone call, this would be a good example and a good opportunity to simply go outside of the message in a completely separate browser window. If you were actually concerned with this, either give them a call with the number on the back of your card, or go to the website directly to their website instead of clicking on the link here. And there's another example, I call this, it's not Netflix, it's Notflix. And it looks legitimate. It looks great. The Crown, fantastic show, interesting series. But when you look at that link, that's not Netflix, vegankiss.net, and then a bunch of gibberish behind it. This is just simply a attempt to try to capture your email and your password. And as we discussed earlier, they would just simply use this and look, if they can get your Facebook account information out of this, or your Google account information out of this, even better. But once they have that, they're going to try to use that on every other financial or business site or service that you might possibly have. So this is why you do not share passwords across platforms.
I think the other interesting thing about this particular URL is that if you look further down in it, it actually does say www.netflix.com. And that's where it's important to know you have to go back to that first single slash and look and know that it says vegankiss.net there, because that's where it's going. Even though netflix.com is later on in the link, it's not going to Netflix, it's going to Netflix.
So we're wrapping up here, and we want to state, if you're able to recognize phishing, and you can do that consistently across your team, then it is wise and it is helpful to have the team operating consistently and be on the same page. That's step one. But the reality is that people are not perfect. And this is where a toolkit and solutions come into play and can be helpful. And so there's a anti-phishing gear checklist that we reference here. We're going to cover these in detail in our next session on Wednesday, so that we talk through, here's what they are, here's what they can do, here's how they can help. But in many respects, your people are going to do their best, but people make mistakes. I know I have certainly clicked on links, and my antivirus software has saved me from a very bad thing happening. Or I've gotten a phone call that sounded legitimate and made it seem as though my grandmother were in distress and I needed to get a gift card. But as soon as I started thinking about it and took a breath, I realized that this was something that almost caught me. So these are tools and capabilities. We're listing them here as kind of a preview, but building off of awareness and understanding, and like Meredith said, building that culture of security, supporting your people with processes and policies and tools. And again, Wednesday will be focused on actionable, practical advice. We have our favorite tools, but we're not selling them. Our job is to simply help you make good and wise choices.
We do have a few resources for today. We talked about free phishing test tools out there. So Phishing Quiz is one of them, which is from Google. And then another is KnowBe4. KnowBe4 also has a training platform that comes with it, but they do have a free phishing test that you can deploy in organizations up to 100 people. At Vertical 6, we use Ningio as a training platform. Ningio offers a 3 to 4 minute video once a month as part of their product that employees can watch. It's tracked and it can be gamified, so that there's a little bit of fun that can be had with it. We find that the videos are very current, so they're typically addressing events that we're seeing in the wild, as we say, during the month that they produce them. And Ningio also right now has released 10 of their videos related to working from home for free. So head over to their website and you can see what those 10 free videos are that you can distribute to your employees. One other piece with Ningio is that if you have a paid subscription, you can also share it with your family members, so that you can build that security culture inside your house, where it's also important, and inside your business. And then some other testing tools, getgofish.com is another one.
And the reason we like these is because we've learned from them, so it's good to be refreshed. But they're also free, if not inexpensive, and they are also understandable. That they are plain spoken and easy to understand and easy to grasp. And that's really one of the biggest things here is that don't overcomplicate it. There's a lot of jargon. There's a lot of providers and tools and solutions out there. but we've seen a lot of them, and these are some of our favorites. You may have a favorite, that's totally fine, but these are the things that we use to help get started when we were building cultures of security and protecting our clients in the wild, so to speak.
And then just a quick recap. We focused for our first session on a topic that is very narrowly defined, because phishing is the #1 risk. At the beginning of our presentation, we talked about the fact that 91% of breaches are perpetuated through phishing in the security world today. So phishing is where we need to focus a lot of our attention. Second, education is key. So if folks know what to look for and they can take a moment before opening an attachment or clicking on a link or buying a gift card, having that education ahead of time is key. And then third, it's all about balance. We mentioned up front that it's a balance between security, usability, and cost. We can have the most secure system in the world, but nobody would be able to access it. So it's not usable. It doesn't add to the productivity of the business to have so much security that people can't do their jobs. But we have to take a look at what it is we're trying to protect and choose the right tools and solutions to implement in order to make the most efficient use of our money and of our employees' time and resources.
Right. I've attended a security software demonstration, and the key question, how much? And I asked the vendor, how much does this cost? And they said 6 figures. And they said it was the only way a business could secure themselves. And to Meredith's paradigm here, sure, it's secure. Is it infallible? Probably not. But the cost is far higher than most organizations can afford. I choke at 6 figures. If it costs more than a Honda Civic, I want to see a pretty good business case on that. And in the security space, there's a fair number of solutions and providers that are cost prohibitive for a lot of small businesses. And so what's right for you, you have to determine in a sense, but remembering that what we are talking about here are key foundational essentials that are going to really, from a holistic point of view, protect you.
So we'll be back on Wednesday morning, to talk about the tools that companies can and do have in their toolkits. And on Friday mornings, talk about partners you may want to be working with in the business community to help with further securing your environment and making sure that you have what you need for your business to be protected, yet functional and productive.
And as we walk through this, I think even Meredith and I have probably felt a little bit of, oh yeah, I should probably do that. So again, nobody's perfect, but together we're stronger and the community is better.